Over the last 10 years, Marvel has been a powerhouse at the box office, primarily because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Movies like Avengers and Captain America Civil War rake in the dough, but they're also beloved by critics and fans. This franchise is so successful that even the ones that are kind of smaller on the scale still have a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and they make enough money to get a sequel. Except for The Incredible Hulk. But this isn't a new thing. Marvel has been making movies a long time. They actually first put something in the theaters over 70 years ago. So here's a list of 11 movies that have been put out about Marvel properties that nobody talks about. First on our list is Captain America the Serials from 1944. This isn't necessarily a full-length film per se, but it's a series of serials that add up to the length of a film. This is the first time that a Marvel Comics property was actually put in film form. And it's so early that it's actually before Marvel was called Marvel. At the time, they were called Timely Comics. And this is the first time anything from that was ever put to film. To read the description to you, it'll give you an idea of what we're talking about here. The serial sees Captain America, really District Attorney Grant Gardner, trying to thwart the plans of the Scarab, the museum curator Dr. Cyrus Maldor, especially regarding the attempts to acquire, and I'm not joking, this is the plot of the movie, the dynamic vibrator and the electronic firebolt, devices that could be used as superweapons. These serials were the earliest form of taking comic books and putting them into movie theaters, and while they don't age very well, they're very difficult to watch based off modern standards, they are the start of where the modern films are coming from. And while this is Captain America's first time on our list, it's not going to be his last. Number 2 on our list is the movie Howard the Duck from 1986. Soon after finishing Return of the Jedi, a young George Lucas decided he wanted to produce a comic book movie and decided on the weirdest and creepiest comic book he could, and he went with Howard the Duck. Now, this movie does somewhat still have a place in the discussion when we talk about bad movies or George Lucas's weird career after Return of the Jedi, but what people forget about is that it's actually based off of a Marvel comic. One that I've never read, one that you've probably never read, but technically speaking, this is a Marvel movie. This movie is so weird and messed up that there's a YouTube video called The 10 Most Disturbing Scenes in Howard the Duck, and number 1 isn't a scene of a naked female duck in a bathtub with its boobs exposed. That's not number 1 in this movie. The next 3 films on our list, I'm going to clump them all together, and these are The Incredible Hulk Returns, The Trial of the Incredible Hulk, and The Death of the Incredible Hulk. These films are a trilogy of movies following up the 70s TV show starring Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, and while people talk favorably about the TV show, typically these made-for-TV movies get forgot, and there's a reason for that. These movies tended to go beyond the scope of what you could do with the budget that they had. So in The Return of the Incredible Hulk, Thor appears. As you can see from the footage, this was not a good idea. It hasn't aged well. It looks really, really bad. Then its follow-up, The Trial of the Incredible Hulk, brought Daredevil in. Once again, it looks really bad. They end not on a high note, but more of a low note with The Death of the Incredible Hulk, where the Incredible Hulk, dies. And they kind of spoiled that one in the title. Kind of a weird choice there. Looking at the results, you can figure out pretty quickly why Marvel decided to hold off on some of these characters for 20 years until they really took another stab at them. And I think the results have paid off. Number 6 on our list is The Punisher from 1989, starring Dolph Lundgren. Over the last 15 years, we've had 2 failed Punisher movies. We've had the wildly successful take on the show Daredevil. So this movie kind of gets forgotten. It's the one that doesn't get talked about because it's so long ago. And really, if you think about it, the character of the Punisher is kind of like a lot of 80s action heroes. He's the anti-hero from some government agency who has something terrible happen to him, so he's out for revenge against X. He's an anti-hero that you root for because he's really violent. That's the comic books, and that's what this movie is. And so, being that a very 80s action movie premise came out in the middle or at the very end of the 80s and was made in a very 80s style starring a stereotypical 80s action star, the movie's kind of forgettable. It's not awful. It's not terrible. It's just like the genre it is, an 80s action revenge movie. If you watch it as that, and if you like that kind of movie, you'll enjoy this movie. But the most interesting thing to me is the writer Boyack Yazin, which that name is pretty interesting. But he went on to eventually direct Remember the Titans, Uptown Girls, and that dog movie from last year, Max. So he went on to have a career absolutely nothing like the way his career started, writing The Punisher. Number 7 on our list is Captain America from 1990. I remember when they first started promoting this film when I was growing up, and I saw some posters. I don't think I saw a trailer, but I was anticipating a Captain America movie. And then I never saw it. For quite a while, it never came out in theaters, which confused me. Eventually, I saw it at the local video store, and I was able to rent it, watch it, and then it came on like HBO or something and recorded on an old VHS tape, so I watched it all the time. In fact, out of all humans on the planet Earth, I would imagine I'm probably in the top 1 percentile when it comes to the number of times I've watched this movie. I've watched it quite a bit. With all that said, it's not a good movie. I could spend some time trashing it right now, but you can go over to Honest Trailers, or you can watch Chris Stuckman's Hilariosity review of it. They do a much funnier job than I would do trashing this movie because it's worthy of being trashed. Which is kind of a shame because on paper this should be a much better movie than it is. It's a fairly straightforward Captain America origin story, then he's lost in time and then he has to fight the Red Skull in present day. Structurally, it's pretty good. There's actually some really good actors in it. You've got Darren McGavin, you've got Ned Beatty, you've got Ronnie Cox, as we of course remember from him almost replacing Patrick Stewart on Star Trek The Next Generation in the two-part episode, Chain of Command. You almost feel bad because there's great actors in it, there's a great premise. I've actually seen an interview with the writer of it where he talks about how good his script was and how much his script does not resemble the movie that was made. You almost feel bad for the people involved in making this because it's so not good. But of course, the most interesting thing about this movie is that Captain America is played by Matt Salinger, the son of J.D. Salinger, the writer of The Catcher in the Rye, which of course is the book that Mel Gibson's character in the movie Conspiracy Theory had to go out and buy constantly because he was programmed by Patrick Stewart to kill people and buy that book. It's a weird movie, and Patrick Stewart is making way too many appearances in this section in a movie that he does not appear in. Number 8, The Fantastic Four from 1994, or when they made it, 1992. See, I first heard about this movie from Wizard Magazine back in 1992. If you don't know Wizard Magazine, it was a comic book magazine that in the back of it tell you how much your comic books were worth. Now you use the internet for that kind of thing and get your news from the internet. Anyway, they ran an article on this Fantastic Four movie and had a picture of Doctor Doom in it. So I was waiting for a Fantastic Four movie to come out. And then it didn't. And then I heard nothing about this movie for like 10 years. I mean, nothing, no news. I knew it kind of existed. I knew it was created because I had the magazine. I could see the pictures, but knew nothing about it. Jump forward 10 years, the advent of high-speed internet means you can find stuff like this on the internet. A buddy of mine found it, burned it onto a CD, gave it to me. I think that's illegal, but they never released it, so I guess it's not that illegal. But he gave it to me. I finally got to watch it. And if you want to watch something that makes that Captain America movie we just talked about look good, watch this Fantastic Four movie. If you want Fan Four Stick from last year to look good, watch this movie. If you want those ones from 10 years ago to look good, watch this movie. It is bad. It is real bad. The special effects are just shockingly bad. Stuff that I would do. Actually, they're doing stuff worse than what I would do because I've got After Effects and I can do better stuff than this. So it turns out there's something more interesting than the story of this movie, and it's the story of the making of this movie. The studio behind it was about to lose the rights to make a Fantastic Four movie, so in order to keep the rights, they decided to put in production a movie they never planned to release, and they didn't tell the cast. So the cast is seriously making this movie. Wizard Magazine thinks they're going to make this movie, so they go out and do articles, and there's all these write-ups about it. And the studio never planned to release it, and never did. There's actually a documentary about this movie in the works called Doom the Movie. You can go to doomedthemovie.com and find out more about it. I'm way more interested in watching this documentary about this movie than ever watching this movie again. Number 9 on our list is Generation X from 1996. This is kind of an X-Men spin-off TV movie that they made. I don't know why they made it. This made-for-TV X-Men movie features none of the X-Men you want to see, and about 10 of the X-Men you don't want to see in a plot you're not interested in. There's nothing interesting about this movie at all. Oh, there's one interesting thing. They used the same mansion that's used in the future X-Men movies, as well as Smallville and Arrow. That's it. That's the only interesting thing about this movie. Number 10 on our list, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Before Joss Whedon's brother brought us the very meh TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., David Hasselhoff brought us the original Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. This wonderful piece of late 90s cheese is just as corny as you would expect a comic book movie that's made for TV starring David Hasselhoff in the 90s would be. For what it's worth, David Hasselhoff wasn't a terrible pick for Frank Fury. No, that's not a person. Nick Fury at the time. Before the Ultimate Avengers comic book came out a few years after this, and they redesigned Nick Fury to look like Samuel L. Jackson, he looked like David Hasselhoff. David Hasselhoff's a big guy, and back in the 80s, he was kind of respectable, at least a bit, as kind of an action star type of personality, so it made sense. That's my best effort to defend it. The most interesting thing about this particular movie is that it's written by David S. Goyer. Now, if you don't know who this guy is, he's like the most prolific and famous writer of comic book movies. Just as the writer, not as the director, but as the writer. He's done a lot of these. Just to read off the list, Blade 2, Blade Trinity, Batman Begins, Ghost Rider, The Dark Knight, Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, The Dark Knight Rises, Man of Steel, and Batman v Superman. He either wrote the script or was involved in the story process for every single one of those movies, which is interesting because he's like has the highest of highs and the lowest of lows and everything in between. He's an interesting guy, and he started off by writing Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., starring David Hasselhoff. Number 11, Man-Thing from 2005. It is the last in order of when it came out chronologically, and it's the least interesting to me as a movie. For starters, the property is based off of a comic book character that you've probably never heard of, that I've barely heard of. The movie was pitched for theaters and then went from theaters to direct-to-video to direct-to-sci-fi. That was its fall from grace. Here's the plot summary as it is listed on Wikipedia. Agents of an oil tycoon vanish while exploring a swamp marked for drilling. The local sheriff investigates and faces a seminal legend come to life. Man-Thing, a shambling... Oh, sorry, I think I fell asleep there a little bit because I lost interest in the plot that was clearly something like Swamp Thing, but different. Still not interested. The most interesting thing I could find about this movie, since it was terrible and I'm not interested in the subject matter, is this comment from the comment section of a fan-made trailer for this movie. Wade Red Deadpool Wilson writes, and I'm sure this is the real Wade Wilson, "Congratulations, folks, you found a trailer to a movie 100 times worse than Fan4Stick." So there you have it, 11 Marvel movies that nobody talks about, primarily because there's not much to talk about. But if you dig deep enough, there is something interesting to say about each and every one of these movies, even Generation X. Have you seen any of these films? Are they better than they looked? Are they worse? Tell us what you think in the comments section. I'd love to hear from you. If you're new to this channel, please click that subscribe button so you can catch up on all the videos I put up. Thank you for watching.